They fired the quiet compliance specialist on Christmas Eve to cut costs. What the Mafia boss CEO didn't know, she was the only one holding his empire together. By the time he realized, the regulatory avalanche had already begun, and only she could stop it. The elevator to the 42nd floor only moved for 3 types of people: those being promoted, those being acquired, and those about to disappear. Lena Chen knew which category she fell into. Her badge beeped against the scanner at 9:47 a.m. on Christmas Eve. The doors opened directly into the executive suite. No reception desk, no waiting area, just black marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city already half empty for the holidays. She'd worked at Apex Solutions for 6 years and had never been up here. Never needed to be. Miss Chun, a woman in a steel-gray suit, appeared from a side corridor. This way. Lena followed, her worn canvas bag clutched against her ribs. Inside it, a turkey sandwich she'd made at 5 a.m., her mother's medication reminder list, and a laptop so old it had a DVD drive. The hallways smelled like leather and something else. Power, maybe, or the particular silence that came with it. They entered a conference room built for negotiating mergers, not firing 32-year-old compliance specialists who still bought their blazers from outlet malls. And there he was. Victor Kane sat at the far end of a table that could seat 20.
He didn't stand.
Didn't smile. His hands were folded on the table's glossy surface, hands that, according to company legend, had once broken a supplier's contract and possibly his collarbones in the same conversation. He was 50-something, with silver threading through black hair, and eyes that looked like they'd watched empires fall and felt nothing. Apex Solutions wasn't technically a criminal enterprise, but everyone knew Kane ran it like one. Territories instead of departments. Enforcers instead of managers. Loyalty oaths disguised as NDAs. The company had grown 300% in 5 years by operating in that profitable gray space between legal and merely not yet prosecuted. Sit, Kane said. Not offered. Commanded. Lena sat. The HR woman. Lena realized she'd never caught her name. Opened a folder. Ms. Chun, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. We're restructuring the compliance division. Consolidating, Kane corrected, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. We're consolidating redundant functions. Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to ask which functions were redundant. The part where she'd caught the Philadelphia office misclassifying contractors 3 days before a state audit, or the part where she'd rewritten their waste disposal protocols to avoid EPA violations, or maybe the part where she'd spent last Tuesday night, unpaid, untangling a lawsuit that would have cost them $40 million. Instead, she said, I understand. You'll receive 4 weeks severance, the HR woman continued. Healthcare through the end of January. We'll need your badge, building access card, and any company property. Lena placed her badge on the table. She'd never been issued an access card. Her clearance was too low. As for company property, the laptop in her bag was technically hers. She'd bought it herself when IT said budget constraints meant compliance got hand-me-downs. Kane watched her with those flat, assessing eyes. In his world, she knew quiet people were problems. They hoarded information. They harbored resentments. They testified. Sign here. The HR woman slid papers across the table. Standard separation agreement.
Non-disparagement clause.
Confidentiality provisions. Lena read it. Actually read it, unlike the 37 managers who'd signed similar documents, without blinking. The clause that caught her attention wasn't the silence provision. It was the liability release. Employee acknowledges that Apex Solutions Corporation bears no responsibility for any regulatory, legal, or compliance issues arising from employees' tenure or departure. She almost laughed. They were covering their tracks before she'd even left the building. Any questions? The HR woman asked in a tone that meant there better not be. Lena thought of 100 questions. She thought of the compliance calendar she'd built, tracking 18 different regulatory agencies across 11 states. She thought of the custom monitoring system she'd coded in Python on weekends, the one that scraped government databases for early warning signs of investigations. She thought of the personal relationships she'd quietly cultivated with clerks and junior regulators, people who'd tip her off about incoming audits, because she'd once helped their offices untangle procedural confusions. She thought of the bridge loan paperwork for her mother's surgery, due in 48 hours. No questions, Lena said.
She signed.
Kane stood then, buttoning his suit jacket. Compliance is expensive, Ms. Chun. In the current market, we need to be leaner, more efficient. What he meant, you cost money. You don't generate it. Your weight we're cutting. What Lena heard, you were never valuable enough to be visible. She gathered her things. The HR woman walked her to the elevator, hand hovering near Lena's elbow without quite touching, the way you'd guide someone who might bolt. When the elevator doors opened, Lena stepped in and turned. Kane had followed them into the hallway. He stood 10 feet away, watching her with that same flat expression. "Merry Christmas, Miss Chun," he said. The doors closed on his face. Lena rode down 42 floors in silence. When she exited into the lobby, security was already waiting. They escorted her to her cubicle, 3rd floor, northwest corner, the one with the broken heating vent, and watched while she packed her few personal items. A photo of her mother. A coffee mug with a chemistry joke nobody had ever laughed at. A succulent that had died 2 months ago but she'd kept anyway, hoping. By 10:23 a.m., she was on the street. Snow had started falling, fat flakes that dissolved on contact with the still warm pavement. The city churned around her, last-minute shoppers, office parties spilling into early lunches, delivery trucks blocking intersections. Everyone moving with purpose except her. Lena walked 6 blocks to the train station and bought a ticket for the 6:15 p.m. departure. Then she sat in a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and burned espresso, opened her laptop, and began disconnecting the systems she'd built. The compliance monitoring scripts, the automated alert triggers, the database cross-references, the custom APIs she'd set up to ping her phone whenever certain keywords appeared in regulatory filings. One by one, she shut them down. Nobody had asked her to. Nobody even knew they existed. But they ran on her personal servers, her personal accounts, her personal time. And Lena Chun had been raised to believe that when you left a job, you left cleanly. By 5:30 p.m., it was done. 6 years of invisible infrastructure, erased. She boarded the train as the city lights began to glow. Found a window seat. Watched the buildings slide past, then the suburbs, then the darkness between. Her phone stayed silent. No farewell texts from coworkers. No last-minute questions about handoff procedures. She'd been so quiet, so careful not to make waves, that her absence barely registered as a ripple. As the train crossed the state line, Lena closed her eyes and let herself imagine something impossible, a Christmas where she wasn't tethered to a phone, waiting for the next emergency. A morning where she could drink coffee slowly. A life where her work existed in daylight, where people knew her name. Behind her, 300 miles away, the last firewall protecting Apex Solutions Corporation from its own negligence went dark. Nobody noticed.
Not yet.
The train cut through the darkness like a blade through silk, smooth and irreversible. Lena pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching her reflection ghost over the passing landscape. Somewhere out there, beyond the glass and the night, was the town where she'd grown up, where her mother still lived in the same house with the crooked porch steps, where nobody had heard of Victor Kane or Apex Solutions or the particular flavor of fear that came with working in a beautiful machine designed to break laws efficiently. Her phone buzzed. Not a call, a notification. Regulatory filing alert. EPA Region 3. Docket updated. Lena stared at it. Then remembered. She'd shut down the monitoring system. This was a ghost, a delayed notification that had queued before the shutdown completed. She swiped it away. Then another buzz through. State audit notice. New Jersey Department of Labor. Her thumb hovered over the notification. Old instincts died hard. For 6 years, these alerts had been her responsibility, her burden, her secret purpose. She'd built the system because nobody else had cared to, because the official compliance software Apex used was garbage, a checkbox system designed to create the appearance of diligence, not actual protection. Lena deleted the notification without opening it. Not her problem anymore. The businessman across the aisle was wrapping presents, awkwardly folding paper around what looked like a tablet box. He kept glancing at her, maybe wondering why anyone would be traveling alone on Christmas Eve, leaving the city instead of coming home to it. She could have told him, because home was where you went when you'd been hollowed out. Because her mother needed her, and for once, finally, Lena could be there without her phone erupting every 30 minutes with emergencies that only she knew how to handle. Another notification. Compliance deadline missed. Philadelphia office. Contractor classification. Lena's jaw tightened. She'd fixed that.
Twice.
The Philadelphia office kept hiring independent contractors who worked 40-hour weeks in company offices with company equipment. It was blatant misclassification, the kind of thing that invited audits and penalties and very unwelcome attention from the Department of Labor. She'd explained this to Philadelphia's office manager 4 times. Had sent documented procedures. Had offered to train their HR person. They nodded and smiled and kept doing it anyway, because fixing it required effort and admitting they'd been wrong, and why worry when problems always seem to resolve themselves? Because of her. Problems resolved because Lena stayed late, made calls, filed corrections, built relationships with the junior regulators who could make things disappear before they reached their supervisors' desks. She turned off her notifications. All of them. The sudden silence felt like pressure change, like her ears popping during descent. For 6 years, her life had been measured in alerts and emergencies, in fires she'd put out so quietly that nobody even smelled smoke. She'd become a ghost in her own life, haunting the edges of the company's mistakes, cleaning up messes that were never supposed to exist. "Tickets, please," the conductor called, moving down the aisle. Lena handed hers over. The conductor punched it with a satisfying click-thunk and handed it back. "Merry Christmas," he said, with the weary cheer of someone working a holiday shift. "You too," Lena managed. The train swayed, rhythmic and hypnotic. Other passengers had settled in for the journey, reading, dozing, staring at phones that glowed like campfires in the dimness. Normal people doing normal things. Not one of them monitoring 18 regulatory agencies, tracking audit cycles, maintaining secret relationships with government clerks who could be the difference between a warning and a 7-figure fine. Lena pulled out her own phone one last time. Opened the compliance calendar she'd maintained obsessively, color-coded, cross-referenced, annotated with details about each agency's quirks and preferences. The New Jersey DOL liked filings submitted on Tuesdays. The EPA inspector in Region 3 always checked waste manifests first. The OSHA office in Philadelphia was understaffed and therefore 3 months behind, but absolutely vicious when they finally caught up. She'd built this knowledge base piece by piece, filing it away in spreadsheets and documents that lived only on her devices. The official compliance system at Apex had none of it. Neither did her replacement, if they even bothered hiring one. With her thumb hovering over the delete button, Lena hesitated. Then she thought of Victor Kane's flat eyes, watching her like she was a liability to be managed. Of 6 years of good work that had never translated to a promotion, a raise, or even basic recognition. Of working Christmas Eve 2023 from her mother's hospital room, fixing a crisis while her mother slept off surgery. Of the HR woman who hadn't bothered learning her name before firing her. Lena deleted the calendar. Then the spreadsheets, the contact lists, the procedure documents, the institutional knowledge that had kept Apex Solutions from imploding under the weight of its own careless ambition. File by file, she erased herself. When she was done, her phone felt lighter. Or maybe she did. The train carried her east, toward morning, toward a small house with a woman who'd raised her to be careful and quiet and good. Away from the glass towers where careful and quiet meant invisible, where good meant exploitable. Behind her, the city disappeared into the distance. And with it, the last threads holding Apex Solutions' empire together. December 26th arrived cold and gray, the kind of morning where the sun never quite committed to rising. At the Apex Solutions regional office in Wilmington, Delaware, Marcus Webb walked through the door at 8:47 a.m., holding a gas station coffee and nursing a headache that tasted like regret and his brother-in-law's homemade eggnog. The envelope was taped to his office door. Official seal. State letterhead. The words compliance notice in bold across the front. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus muttered, ripping it down. Inside, 3 pages of dense legal language that boiled down to something very simple and very expensive. The Delaware Department of Labor had questions.
Lots of them.
About contractor classifications, payment schedules, and whether Apex had been following state labor laws or just creatively interpreting them into non-existence. Marcus had been regional manager for 2 years. In that time, he'd learned that compliance notices were like car trouble, annoying, but they always seemed to fix themselves if you ignored them long enough. Someone in corporate would make a call, file some paperwork, and the whole thing would evaporate like morning fog. He dropped the envelope on his desk and forgot about it. By 10:15 a.m., his phone rang. Webb, the voice belonged to Christine Varga, HR director for the Northeast region. She sounded like someone had set her morning on fire. "Tell me you didn't get a DOL notice." Marcus glanced at the envelope.
Oh, yeah, that.
"It just came today. I was going to. Philadelphia got one too. So did our Trenton office." That made Marcus sit up straighter. 1 notice was background noise. 3 simultaneous notices was a pattern, and patterns meant someone was paying attention. "What do they want?" he asked. Contractor audits going back 18 months. Full documentation on every 1099 worker. Payment records, hour logs, workspace arrangements. Christine's keyboard clattered in the background. "This is surgical, Marcus. They're not fishing. They know exactly what they're looking for. So we give them what they want. We're clean, right?" The silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds too long. "Christine? Just pull the files," she said. "I need everything by end of day tomorrow." She hung up. Marcus stared at his phone, then at the envelope, then at the calendar on his wall where December 25th was crossed out in red marker. Christmas had been yesterday. Nobody launched major compliance actions the day after Christmas. It was ungentlemanly, unprofessional. Whoever filed these notices had done it deliberately, strategically, when most offices would be skeleton crewed and slow to respond. He opened his laptop and navigated to the shared compliance drive, looking for the contractor documentation. The folder was there, but inside it, nothing recent. The last updated file was from August. What the hell? Marcus clicked through subfolders, his headache sharpening into something with teeth. Where were the quarterly reviews? The classification audits? The backup documentation that was supposed to be automatically generated? He called down to HR. "Jenny, it's Marcus. I need the contractor files for the last 6 months. Should be on the shared drive," Jenny said through what sounded like a mouthful of leftover ham. "They're not. Then check with compliance." "I am compliance. For this office, anyway." "No, I mean the compliance specialist. The one in corporate who does the monitoring." Jenny paused. "What's her name, Linda? Lena?" "Lena," Marcus said slowly, the name surfacing from some buried memory. "Lena Chen."
Right.
"Her. She usually handles the back-end stuff. Just email her." Marcus opened his email and typed Lena's name into the address bar. Her contact card popped up, but when he tried to send a message, it bounced back immediately. "User account disabled." He called Jenny back. "Lena Chen's email is dead." "Oh," Jenny's chewing sound stopped. "Oh yeah. I heard she got let go. Christmas Eve, I think. Budget cuts or something." The room felt colder suddenly. Marcus had never met Lena Chen. Wasn't even entirely sure what she did, beyond some vague understanding that she worked in compliance and kept to herself. The kind of employee you never thought about because everything just
Worked.
He looked at the state notice again, at the detailed list of violations that someone had clearly compiled with precision and care. The kind of violations that didn't just appear. The kind someone had been actively preventing. "When did she leave?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the dropping sensation in his stomach. "Like I said, Christmas Eve." "Why?" Marcus calculated. Lena fired on the 24th, notices delivered on the 26th. That was a turnaround time that suggested the investigations had been ready and waiting, held back by something or someone who'd suddenly stopped holding them back. No reason, Marcus lied. Thanks, Jenny. He hung up and stared at the envelope. One name kept circling through his head like a curse. Lena Chun. The ghost who'd been keeping the walls from collapsing, so quietly that nobody had noticed she was holding them up. Until she wasn't. December 27th began with an email that arrived at 6:42 a.m., before most of the executive team had finished their first coffee. The subject line read, "Urgent. Multi-state regulatory action. Immediate response required." Christine Vargas sent it to 43 people. By 7:15 a.m., only 12 had opened it. By 8 a.m., 3 had responded, and all 3 responses were some variation of forwarding to compliance. There was no compliance to forward to. At 9:30 a.m., Christine stood in the doorway of her boss's office. Robert Halloway, VP of Operations, a man who'd built his career on the principle that problems were just opportunities that hadn't been spun correctly yet. "It's expanding," Christine said without preamble. Robert looked up from his phone, where he'd been scrolling through vacation photos from his Aspen trip. "What is?" "The regulatory actions. We're up to 5 offices now. Delaware, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Trenton, and as of this morning, Baltimore." She dropped a stack of notices on his desk, each one flagged with a colored tab. EPA, Department of Labor, OSHA, and the Maryland Department of the Environment. They're coming from different agencies, but the patterns are identical. Patterns? Contractor misclassification. Waste disposal protocols. Workplace safety documentation. Records retention. Christine ticked them off on her fingers. These aren't random inspections, Robert. Someone built a roadmap and handed it to every regulatory agency in the Northeast Corridor. Robert picked up the top notice, scanned it, set it down. "So we respond. We've dealt with regulatory inquiries before." "Not like this." Christine leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "These notices are citing specific violations with dates, times, and documentation references. They know exactly where to look because someone already looked." "Industrial espionage? A whistleblower?" "I don't think so." Christine hesitated, then said the name that had been rattling around in her head since Marcus Webb's call yesterday. "Lena Chun." Robert's expression went blank.
Who?
"Compliance specialist. Corporate office. She was terminated on Christmas Eve." "Okay." Robert drew the word out, waiting for relevance. "Robert, every single violation in these notices, every single one, is something that would have triggered an automatic alert in a properly monitored compliance system. But our official system?" Christine pulled up her phone, showed him a screenshot of the company's compliance dashboard. Every indicator glowed green. "According to this, we're perfect. 0 issues." "So, the system works?"
No.
"The system is lying." Christine's voice sharpened. "It's been lying for years, and nobody noticed because someone was running a parallel system, actually catching the problems, actually fixing them before they became visible." Robert set down the notice. "You're saying this Chin woman was..."
What?
"Running some kind of shadow operation?" "I'm saying she was doing her job while the official systems we spent $600,000 on were basically decorative." Christine pulled out her own tablet, opened a file she'd been building since yesterday. "I started digging. Every time we should have been fined in the last 3 years, every missed deadline, every failed inspection, every near-miss audit, there's a correction filed within 48 hours. Always from the same IP address. Always signed by Lena Chin. So she was good at her job. That's not evidence of..." "She was working off the clock, Robert. Nights, weekends, holidays. Using her own equipment, her own resources." Christine's jaw tightened. "We fired the person who was holding this entire house of cards together, and now the cards are falling." Robert stood, walked to the window. Below, the city moved with its usual morning rhythm, cabs and pedestrians and delivery trucks navigating the post-holiday slowdown. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. "How bad?" he asked. "Right now?" We're looking at maybe 200,000 in fines, if we can contain it to these 5 offices. Christine paused. But if this spreads, if other states start comparing notes, if federal agencies get involved, we could be looking at millions. Plus legal fees, plus remediation costs, plus the PR nightmare when this goes public. It won't go public. Robert, we have regulatory notices from 5 states delivered within 72 hours of each other. That's not a coincidence someone can bury. Robert turned from the window, his expression hardening into something Christine recognized, the look of a man deciding who to blame. Where's Chen now? Unknown. Personal phone disconnected. Home address is her mother's place upstate, but she's not answering. Find her. And say what? Sorry we fired you. Please come back and fix the problems we didn't know you were solving? I don't care what you say. Robert's voice dropped to the temperature that made junior executives remember why he'd climbed this high. Find her. Offer her whatever it takes. Because if this company goes down, it's not going down because some nobody in compliance decided to throw a tantrum. Christine wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that Lena Chen hadn't thrown anything, had, in fact, left so quietly that most people didn't know she'd existed. Instead, she nodded and left. In her office, she tried Lena's cell again. It rang 4 times, then. The number you've dialed is no longer in service. Christine hung up and stared at the growing list of violations on her screen. Somewhere out there, the woman who could fix this had vanished. And the dominoes kept falling. The house smelled like ginger and cardamom, spices her mother had been grinding since dawn. Lena woke on December 27th to sunlight slanting through curtains she'd sewn herself in high school, faded blue cotton printed with constellations that had never quite lined up correctly. The room hadn't changed in 14 years. Same desk where she'd studied for the SATs. Same bookshelf crammed with chemistry textbooks and fantasy novels. Same window overlooking the backyard where snow had buried the garden her mother refused to abandon each spring. For the first time in 6 years, Lena had slept past 6 a.m.
No alarm.
No emergency calls. Number 3 a.m. jolt awake wondering if she'd missed a filing deadline or forgotten to check a regulatory update. Just sleep. Deep and dreamless and complete. Lena? Her mother's voice drifted up the stairs, accented and warm. You're awake. Coming, Ma. Lena found her in the kitchen, standing at the stove despite the doctor's orders to rest. Mei Chun was 68 but moved like someone still negotiating with time, refusing to surrender to the cancer that had been eating at her pancreas for 18 months. She wore the same floral apron she'd had since Lena was 8, the one with the pocket that always held hard candies. You should be sitting, Lena said. I sit all day. Today I cook. May stirred something in a pot that smelled like childhood, star anise and soy sauce and her mother's particular magic. You look tired. I fine. You look tired, May repeated, which meant there was no arguing. This job, they work you too hard. I tell you this. Lena had told her mother she'd quit. Not fired, quit. A better opportunity, she'd said. More flexibility to visit, to help with appointments, to be here when it mattered. May had looked at her with those dark eyes that saw through every lie Lena had ever attempted and said simply, good. Now Lena sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd done homework and eaten 10,000 meals and told her mother she was going to study chemistry because it made sense, because reactions followed rules, because if you understood the principles you could predict the outcomes. She'd been so sure of that once. Eat. May placed a bowl in front of her. Congee with preserved egg and pork, comfort in ceramic. You're too thin. I'm the same weight I've always been. Too thin always. May sat across from her with tea, watching Lena eat with the satisfaction of someone whose love language was feeding people. So, this new job. When do you start? After New Year's. They're giving me time to settle in. Another lie. But what was she supposed to say? I got fired on Christmas Eve for being too invisible, too quiet, too good at solving problems nobody wanted to acknowledge existed. Her phone sat on the counter, screen dark and silent. She'd turned it back on this morning, half expecting a flood of messages. Instead, nothing. No texts from former coworkers. No voicemails from managers suddenly realizing they had questions. No emergency calls about systems only she understood. It was like she'd never existed. You don't look happy, May observed. I'm happy. Lena, her mother's voice carried that particular tone. The one that meant I raised you, I know you, stop lying. Something's wrong.
Lena set down her spoon.
Outside the window, a cardinal landed on the snow-covered fence, bright red against white. Beautiful and improbable. I spent 6 years, Lena said slowly, fixing things. Problems that would have destroyed the company. And nobody knew. Nobody cared. I was just
there,
in the background, cleaning up messes quietly. Like your father, May said softly. Lena looked up, startled. He worked maintenance. 30 years at the university. He fixed pipes, electrical, heating. Students never saw him. Professors never thanked him. But when he died, May's eyes shone. The building broke down in 6 months. They had to hire 3 people to replace him. Lena had been 12 when her father died. She remembered the funeral, small, quiet, attended by a handful of colleagues and the family. She remembered thinking he'd lived such a small life, fixing broken things in basements where nobody saw. She'd promised herself she'd be different, visible, important. Instead, she'd become him. Did he mind? Lena asked. Being invisible? He minded being invisible to me?
No.
Being invisible to them?
May shrugged.
He used to say, the best work is the work nobody notices. It just works. She reached across the table, took Lena's hand. But you notice. That's what hurts. The cardinal flew away, leaving tiny prints in the snow. I don't want to be bitter, Lena whispered. So don't be. May squeezed her hand. You're free now. From people who didn't see you. You think that's a loss. Lena's phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. She didn't reach for it. Let it ring, May said. Today we're here. Just us. The world can wait. So Lena let it ring. Let the messages pile up from numbers she didn't recognize, from people suddenly remembering she'd existed, from a company that was probably only now realizing what her silence had been protecting. She finished her congee, helped her mother with the dishes, sat in the living room while May napped, reading a novel she'd bought 3 years ago and never opened. For one day, just one, Lena Chun let herself disappear on purpose. And it felt like breathing. December 28th, 11:47 p.m. Victor Kane didn't sleep much. Sleep was for people who trusted the world to stay still while they weren't watching. He sat in his home office, a converted library in a brownstone that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, surrounded by screens showing real-time data feeds from every Apex Solutions office. Revenue streams. Project timelines.
Personnel métrique.
Numbers that, until 3 days ago, had been climbing steadily upward like a perfect graph of controlled expansion. Now they looked like a cardiac monitor in crisis. The fines had started appearing in the accounting system at 6 p.m. Small at first, $15,000 here, $23,000 there. Nuisance numbers. The cost of doing business in the gray spaces where Apex operated. But they kept coming. Delaware, $47,000. New Jersey, $62,000. Philadelphia, $89,000. By 10 p.m., the total had crossed $400,000, and the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Kane had built empires before, understood that every structure had stress points, weak links that needed reinforcement or elimination. He thought Apex was clean, not legal necessarily, but insulated, protected by the kind of strategic ambiguity that kept regulators confused and lawyers employed. Someone had stripped away that protection with surgical precision. His private line rang. Only 4 people had the number. Talk, Kane said. We've got a problem. Robert Holloway's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering bad news to someone who'd ended careers over bad news. The regulatory actions are accelerating. We're up to 9 offices now. EPA just flagged our facility in Newark for improper chemical storage going back 14 months. Chemical storage, Kane's voice was flat. We don't store chemicals in Newark. We do. Did some kind of industrial solvent for the manufacturing line. Apparently, it's been mishandled since we acquired that facility. Apparently, Kane let the word hang. How does the EPA know what we've been doing for 14 months in a facility nobody's inspected? Silence on the other end. Someone told them, Kane continued. Someone with access, documentation, and detailed knowledge of our operations. Christine thinks it's related to the Chen termination. Chen, Kane pulled up personnel files on one of his screens, typed the name. A photo appeared, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back severely, wearing a blazer that looked like it came from a clearance rack. Eyes that avoided the camera. The compliance person. Yes. Kane stared at the photo. He prided himself on reading people, on seeing the angles and ambitions that drove them. This woman looked like she'd spent her whole life trying not to be seen. Dangerous, that. People who didn't want attention often noticed everything. What do we know about her?
Kane asked.
Not much. Hired 6 years ago, degree in chemistry from a state school, no disciplinary issues, performance reviews were always satisfactory. Robert paused. She worked alone mostly.
Didn't socialize.
No close relationships in the office that we can identify. Family? Mother upstate. Father deceased.
No siblings.
No significant other on record. Kane pulled up her employee records, scrolling through 6 years of steady, unremarkable service.
No promotions.
No raises beyond cost of living adjustments. No recognition, no awards, no visible trajectory. A ghost in the system. She filed 847 compliance corrections in the last 3 years, Robert continued. All off the clock. All using personal resources. Christine found logs that suggest she was monitoring 18 different regulatory agencies manually. Manually, Kane stopped scrolling. Not through our compliance software. The compliance software doesn't actually work. It's basically decorative. She was doing everything herself. Kane felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear exactly, but recognition. He'd grown up in a world where the most dangerous people weren't the ones who shouted and threatened. They were the ones who worked quietly in shadows, accumulating power through knowledge nobody else bothered to learn. Fixers. Cleaners. The people who made problems disappear so thoroughly that bosses forgot the problems had existed. He'd used people like that his entire life. And he'd just fired one on Christmas Eve. She's not responding to contact attempts, Robert said. Phone's disconnected. She's not at her apartment. We tracked her to her mother's address, but you haven't actually talked to her. Not yet. Kane stood, walked to the window. Manhattan glittered below, a city of angles and opportunities. Somewhere out there, a quiet woman he dismissed as irrelevant was watching his empire crack. I want everything, Kane said. Every file she touched, every correction she made, every contact she had with regulators. I want to know how deep this goes. Victor, it's almost midnight. Most of the staff. Now, Robert. Kane heard the sharp intake of breath, the recognition of a line that shouldn't be crossed. I'll have a preliminary report by morning. Kane hung up and returned to the screens, to the growing list of fines and violations that seemed to multiply in real time. Behind each one, he could almost see her, this ghost he'd dismissed, this woman who'd been holding back chaos with her bare hands. He'd built his reputation on never underestimating opponents. And he'd just underestimated someone catastrophically. Lena Chen, Kane said to the empty room, tasting the name. Then he smiled, the expression of a predator who'd just caught an interesting scent. The hunt had begun. December 29th, 2:34 a.m. Victor Kane sat alone in his office, surrounded by 6 years of evidence that he'd been blind. The files Robert had sent covered 3 monitors, a digital archaeology of one woman's invisible war against entropy.
Spreadsheets. Logs.
Email chains. Regulatory filings. Each document timestamped, most of them created between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., on weekends, on holidays. On Christmas Day 2023, Lena Chun had filed an emergency compliance correction from an IP address that traced back to St. Mary's Hospital. Kane pulled up the details. The correction had prevented a $23 million OSHA fine related to inadequate safety equipment at the Baltimore facility. She'd caught the violation during a routine inspection report review, filed the correction within 4 hours, and included documentation that someone, her, had already ordered and expedited the necessary equipment. While at a hospital, on Christmas, he cross-referenced the date with her personnel file. Her mother had undergone surgery that day. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. Kane sat back, the leather chair creaking. He'd fired people before.
Hundreds of them.
It was mathematics. Calculate value, calculate cost, eliminate inefficiencies. He'd never lost sleep over it because sentiment was weakness, and weakness was how empires fell. But he'd miscalculated. He opened another file, a custom Python script she'd written to scrape regulatory databases. The code was elegant, efficient, the work of someone who'd taught herself programming because the tools she needed didn't exist. Comments in the code revealed her thinking process. Hashtag EPA updates Tuesdays at 6 a.m. Check for new docket entries. Hashtag cross-reference with our facility IDs. Flag anything within 90 days. Hashtag auto-generate calendar reminders for response deadlines. She'd built an early warning system that could have been worth millions to the right buyer. Instead, she'd used it to protect a company that paid her $68,000 a year and fired her the day before Christmas. Kane pulled up the termination meeting recording. His office cameras captured everything, a habit from his old life, when knowing who said what to whom could mean the difference between negotiation and war. He watched himself sit at the conference table, expressionless, while HR delivered the script. Watched Lena Chun sit perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, saying nothing. She'd signed the papers without reading them carefully. He could see it in the way her eyes skimmed the text, the slight tremor in her fingers. She'd been afraid. Not of him. He was used to people being afraid of him. She'd been afraid of something else. Financial ruin, maybe. Medical debt. The particular terror of being expendable. And she'd signed anyway because what choice did she have? Kane had watched this moment 3 days ago and seen a successful termination. Clean, efficient, no drama. Now, he saw something different. The moment he'd removed the last safety net between his company and catastrophic failure. He opened a new file, one Christine had flagged as significant. A relationship map showing Lena's contacts within regulatory agencies. Not the commissioners or directors. The clerks. The junior inspectors. The administrative assistants who scheduled audits and filed paperwork. She'd cultivated relationships with the people who actually did the work, the ones who knew where bodies were buried because they'd helped dig the graves. Next to each name, notes in her handwriting. Sarah Jenkins, EPA Region 3. Daughter graduating NYU in May, loves mystery novels. Marcus Thompson and JDOL. New to the role, asks good questions, wants to do right. Patricia Okonkwo, OSHA Baltimore. Overwhelmed, understaffed, appreciates clear documentation. These weren't transactions. They were relationships. Human connections built on respect and competence, and probably the simple fact that Lena Chun treated government workers like people instead of obstacles. When she left, she'd taken that network with her. Kane found the smoking gun in a folder labeled Near Misses 2024. 17 separate incidents where Apex Solutions should have been investigated, fined, or shut down. 17 times when Lena had intervened, filing corrections, providing documentation, sometimes simply calling her contacts and explaining the situation honestly. March 2024, Philadelphia contractor audit. Result, warning letter instead of $340,000 fine. June 2024, EPA inspection Newark. Result, voluntary compliance agreement instead of immediate penalties. September 2024, OSHA investigation Baltimore. Result, self-reported violations, reduced fines. She'd saved the company at least $47 million in direct fines. Probably tens of millions in legal fees, remediation costs, and reputational damage. for $68,000 a year. Kane did the math. They'd paid her roughly 14% of the value she created, then fired her to save money. He laughed, a short, sharp sound in the empty office. It was the kind of stupidity that got empires destroyed. He'd seen it before, in competitors who'd mistaken ruthlessness for strategy, who'd cut costs until they cut their own throats. He'd profited from that stupidity, acquired their assets, hired their talent. He'd never thought he'd be capable of it himself. His phone showed 3:17 a.m. In a few hours, the executive team would arrive for the emergency meeting he'd called. They'd bring reports, recommendations, action plans. They'd talk about damage control and legal strategy and how to spin this when it inevitably went public. None of it would matter if the bleeding didn't stop. Kane pulled up Lena Chen's photo again, studied that careful face, those averted eyes. She wasn't an opponent. She was a mirror. He'd built Apex Solutions on the principle that power came from knowing what others didn't, from operating in shadows while maintaining a legitimate face. He'd hired lawyers and accountants and yes-men who understood that principle. But he'd missed the person who'd actually been living it. The quiet woman who'd worked in shadows not for power, but because nobody had bothered to give her a desk lamp. Kane closed the files and stood. Finding Lena Chen wouldn't be enough. She had no reason to help him, every reason to watch him fail. But Victor Kane hadn't built what he had by accepting defeat. He pulled out his private phone, not the company line, and dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. "It's me," he said when someone answered. "I need a favor." December 30th arrived with the kind of silence that preceded disasters. By 9 a.m., the Apex Solutions executive conference room had filled with people who looked like they'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Christine Varga sat at the table with 3 folders, each one thicker than the last. Robert Holloway was on his second espresso. The general counsel, a shark-eyed woman named Patricia Moore, had brought her entire legal team. Victor Kane entered at 9:03, and the room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back, and waited. Christine went first. As of 8 a.m., we're facing regulatory actions in 13 states. The total fine exposure is now $27 million, but that's not the real problem. Then what is? Kane's voice was surgical. The audits are expanding. EPA is now looking at air quality permits. The Department of Labor is requesting employment records for every office east of the Mississippi. OSHA wants facility inspections at 9 locations simultaneously. Christine's finger traced down her tablet screen. They're coordinating, Victor. Multiple agencies sharing information, cross-referencing violations. This isn't random enforcement. This is a pattern. Patricia Moore leaned forward. We can fight some of this. Jurisdictional questions, procedural delays, administrative appeals. But if they find what they're looking for, they'll find it, Christine interrupted. Because it's there. All of it. Every violation they're citing is real. The room went silent.
How?
Robert's voice cracked slightly. How did we not know? Because someone was cleaning up behind us. Christine pulled up a presentation on the screen at the far end of the room. I've mapped every regulatory near-miss in the last 3 years. Every single one was resolved by Lena Chen within 48 to 72 hours of the initial trigger. She was running interference we didn't know we needed. The screen filled with a timeline, a visual representation of chaos barely contained. Red flags marking violations, green dots marking Lena's corrections, forming a pattern that looked like a heartbeat monitor. Until December 24th. After that date, just red. No green. Just violations cascading into more violations, unchecked and multiplying. She was the system, Christine said quietly. Our official compliance software? It's garbage. Window dressing for auditors. She knew it, so she built her own infrastructure. Monitoring, alerts, relationships with regulators, all of it running on her personal time, her personal equipment. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. Kane didn't move, but everyone felt the shift in his attention. The regulatory contacts. Can we replicate her network? Patricia shook her head. I've had my team reach out to the agencies. They're professional but distant. Whatever relationships Chin built, they were personal, based on trust. Trust we destroyed when we fired her, Christine added, not bothering to soften it. Kane's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Options. We can try to contain this legally, Patricia said. Fight each action separately, drag things out, negotiate settlements. But we're looking at 18 months minimum, legal fees in the millions, and almost certain conviction on at least some charges. Or, Kane prompted, or we get Chin back. She knows where the bodies are buried. She knows which regulators to talk to and what they'll accept. She could potentially negotiate agreements that keep this from becoming a federal investigation. She won't come back, Robert said flatly. Would you? After how we treated her? The question hung in the air. Kane's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number containing only an address and a time. He glanced at it, then back at the room. What about the press? He asked. Christine grimaced. So far, it's contained. But the Philadelphia Inquirer has been calling our offices. So has the Newark Star-Ledger. If they connect the dots between all these regulatory actions. When they connect the dots, Patricia corrected, we'll be looking at front-page coverage of a multi-state compliance scandal. The stock will tank. Investors will run. Partners will terminate contracts. Christine met Kane's eyes. This company survives regulation. It might not survive the story. Kane absorbed this with the stillness of a predator calculating angles. His empire, built over 15 years through strategic ruthlessness and calculated risk, was unraveling because he'd fired someone he'd never bothered to see. I want a full accounting, he said finally. Every violation we're facing, every potential fine, every legal exposure. Have it ready by tomorrow morning. Victor, tomorrow's New Year's Eve, Robert began. Tomorrow morning, Kane repeated, voice dropping to a register that made smart people stop talking. The meeting ended. Kane remained standing as the room emptied, staring at the timeline on the screen. The visual representation of one woman holding back an avalanche, alone and unacknowledged, until the weight became too much or she simply stopped trying. He thought about the recording of their termination meeting. Her trembling hands. Her quiet, I understand. She'd understood perfectly. Understood that she was expendable. That 6 years of invisible labor meant nothing. That silence was weakness in his world. And now his world was collapsing because he'd believed that too. Kane pulled out his phone and read the text again. An address upstate. A time tomorrow afternoon. Someone had found Lena Chun. Now came the hard part, convincing her that saving his empire was worth her time. He left his office, descended to the parking garage, and told his driver something he hadn't said in 10 years. I'm driving myself. Some negotiations couldn't be done from a throne. December 30th, 4:47 p.m. Lena was elbow-deep in her mother's kitchen sink when her old work phone rang. She'd found it that morning while unpacking, a cheap burner she'd kept for work emergencies, the number known only to a handful of people who might need to reach her after hours. She'd forgotten to throw it away with everything else. The phone sat on the counter, vibrating against the tile. Lena stared at it, hands dripping soapy water. It could be a wrong number.
Or spam. Or...
She dried her hands and checked the caller ID. Marcus Webb, Wilmington office. Marcus. The regional manager who'd sent her exactly 3 emails in 6 years, all of them forwarding compliance questions he didn't understand. She'd answered every one within an hour, usually after midnight, never getting a reply beyond checks. She let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started again. Lena? Her mother called from the living room, where she was watching a cooking show and arguing with the TV chef's technique. You need to answer? No, Lena said. But her hand was already reaching for the phone. Hello? Lena. Thank God, Marcus's voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. I'm not. Lena paused, recalibrated. I don't work there anymore, Marcus. I know. Listen, I need 5 minutes. Please. Something in his voice made her walk out to the back porch, closing the door behind her. The evening air was sharp and clean, snow still piled against the fence line.
5 minutes, she said.
Everything's falling apart. The words came out in a rush. We've got regulatory actions in 13 states. EPA, DOL, OSHA. Everyone's coming down on us at once. The violations they're citing, they're all things that he stopped. They're things you used to fix. Lena leaned against the porch railing, watching her breath fog in the cold. I'm sorry that's happening, she said carefully.
Sorry?
Lena, do you understand what's happening? We're looking at millions in fines. Possible shutdowns. Federal investigations, Marcus's voice cracked. My office alone is facing $180,000 in penalties. I've got 12 people working for me. Good people. They're going to lose their jobs. That's not my problem anymore. I know it's not. But, Marcus took a breath. I should have said this years ago. Thank you for everything you did. We didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it didn't matter. Lena closed her eyes. The apology was sincere. Also worthless. Why are you really calling Marcus? Silence. Then, they want you to come back. Fix this. They're willing to pay.
No.
You didn't let me finish. I don't need to hear the offer because the answer is no. Lena's voice was steady, calm, final. I spent 6 years fixing problems nobody acknowledged existed. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I missed my father's anniversary because of an emergency filing in Philadelphia. I coded monitoring systems from a hospital waiting room while my mother was in surgery. Her breath came faster now. And you know what I got for it?
Fired.
On Christmas Eve. To save money. Lena. Tell them I hope they find someone else. Someone visible. Someone they'll actually pay attention to. She was about to hang up when Marcus said quietly, the cancer center. Lena froze. What? Your mother. She's being treated at St. Catherine's Regional Cancer Center, right? Marcus's voice had changed, become gentler. Their funding got cut last year. State budget crisis. They were going to close the radiation oncology department. I know. Lena had spent 3 weeks last spring trying to find alternative treatment centers within driving distance. There weren't any. They didn't close it, Marcus continued, because Apex Solutions donated $2 million to keep it operational. Corporate Philanthropy Initiative. I saw the press release. Lena's hand tightened on the phone. That's great for them, she managed. Still not my problem. Kane made that donation personally. Not the company, him. I saw the tax records when I was pulling financial documentation yesterday. Marcus paused. Did you know that? She hadn't. She'd been so grateful when St. Catherine's announced they'd secured emergency funding. It had meant her mother could continue treatment close to home, could sleep in her own bed instead of spending weeks in some distant city hospital. Why are you telling me this? Lena asked. Because nothing Victor Kane does is philanthropy. He's not a good guy, Lena. But he's not stupid either. He notices things. And I think maybe he noticed you. He fired me. I know. And I don't have an explanation for that. But if there was even a chance. There isn't. Lena's voice hardened. Goodbye, Marcus. She hung up, stood there in the cold, phone in hand, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Inside, her mother was laughing at something on TV, a sound that had become precious and rare as the cancer progressed. Lena thought about the radiation treatments, the specialized equipment at St. Catherine's, the oncologist who actually knew her mother's name. Thought about Victor Kane's flat eyes watching her sign termination papers. Thought about the $2 million donation that had saved her mother's life. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Rosie's Diner on Route 47. Just a conversation. You have my word, nothing else.
Vika.
Lena stared at the message. Then she went inside, deleted it, and tried very hard not to think about what nothing else meant to a man like Victor Kane. December 31st, 1:52 p.m. Victor Kane sat in a rented sedan, not the company Mercedes, not the town car with a driver, in the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, watching the door. He'd arrived early, another thing he never did. Arriving early meant waiting, and waiting meant yielding control. But this wasn't a negotiation that could be conducted from a position of absolute power. This was something else entirely. The diner was the kind of place Kane hadn't set foot in for 20 years. Red vinyl booths, a counter with spinning stools, the smell of coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. Through the window, he could see a waitress refilling mugs, an old man reading a newspaper, a couple sharing a piece of pie. Normal people living normal lives. At 1:58 p.m., a familiar figure appeared at the end of the parking lot. Lena Chen walked slowly, hands shoved in the pockets of a parka that had seen better winters. She stopped 20 feet from the diner entrance, spotted his car, and for a moment Kane thought she might turn around and leave. Then she moved toward the diner, not toward him. Kane got out of the car and followed. Inside, Rosie's was warm and smelled like grease and cinnamon. Lena had taken a corner booth, as far from other customers as possible. She sat with her back to the wall, a defensive position Kane recognized because he always sat the same way. He slid into the opposite seat. Up close, she looked tired. Not just physically, but the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been holding weight too long and finally set it down. Her eyes, which he remembered as carefully averted, met his directly. "You came," Kane said. "I'm giving you 10 minutes. Then I'm leaving." The waitress appeared, Rosie herself, maybe, an older woman with kind eyes and a coffee pot. "What can I get you folks?" "Just coffee," Lena said. "Same," Kane added. Rosie poured, left 2 menus, and drifted away with the practiced discretion of someone who'd seen 10,000 conversations in these booths. Kane wrapped his hands around the mug. The coffee was terrible, burnt and bitter. He drank it anyway. "Thank you for meeting me," he began. "Don't." Lena's voice was quiet but sharp. "Don't thank me. Don't try to charm me. Don't waste time on pleasantries. You have 10 minutes. Say what you came to say." Kane had prepared a speech. Multiple versions, actually, calibrated for different scenarios. Apologies. Offers. Veiled threats if necessary, though he'd hoped to avoid that. Now, looking at this woman who'd held his empire together with invisible hands, all the prepared words felt like manipulation. So he told her the truth. "I made a mistake," Kane said. "Firing you was the single stupidest decision I've made in 15 years of running Apex Solutions. And I've made a lot of stupid decisions." Lena's expression didn't change. "The company is collapsing," he continued. 13 states, multiple agencies, coordinated investigations. We're looking at $27 million in fines and climbing. Federal involvement is likely. The press is circling. By next week, this becomes a public disaster." "Good," Lena said simply. Kane felt something cold in his chest, not anger, but respect. She meant it. She wanted to watch it burn. 247 people work for Apex Solutions, Kane said. "Most of them have nothing to do with the decisions I made. They're accountants, developers, administrative staff. People with families, mortgages, kids in college. When this company goes down, they go down with it. You should have thought of that before you built a company on violations and shortcuts." "You're right," the admission came easier than he'd expected. "I did. I built something profitable by operating in spaces where others were too cautious or too ethical. I knew the risks. I accepted them." He leaned forward slightly. "But those people in those offices? They didn't know. They trusted that someone was keeping them safe." "Someone was," Lena said. "Until you fired her." "Yes," Kane held her gaze. "Until I fired the one person who was actually doing the job I should have been doing. Making sure that ambition didn't become criminal negligence." Lena's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. "Why did you fire you?" "I need to understand. 6 years. I saved the company millions. I never caused problems, never complained, never asked for anything."
"Why?"
Kane had asked himself the same question 40 times since discovering what she'd been doing. The answer wasn't flattering. "Because I didn't see you," he said. "You were too quiet, too careful. In my world, people who stay invisible are either weak or dangerous. I assumed weak. I was wrong. So, you punish me for not being loud enough. I dismissed you because I'm an idiot who mistakes visibility for value, Kane set down his mug. My father was a union electrician. Worked in buildings like the ones I own now. He used to tell me the most important people in any operation are the ones you never see. The night cleaners. The maintenance crews. The people who keep systems running while everyone else takes credit, he smiled without humor. I forgot that lesson. Surrounded myself with people who performed visibility instead of competence. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm not here to offer you money or threaten you or manipulate you into saving me. Kane pulled an envelope from his jacket, set it on the table. I'm here to ask for help.
Once.
One conversation with the regulators you know. One chance to negotiate settlements before this becomes a federal case. Lena stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. And if I say no, then I deserve what happens next. Kane stood, dropped a 20 on the table. The envelope has contact information. Nothing else.
No contracts, no obligations.
Just a phone number if you change your mind. He turned to leave. Mr. Kane.
He stopped, looked back.
Lena's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. The donation to St. Catherine's. That was you. It wasn't a question. Yes, Kane said.
Why?
Because your mother deserved better than what our healthcare system gave her. And because you deserved better than what I gave you. He paused at the door. I'm sorry, Miss Chen. For what it's worth, which I know isn't much. I'm genuinely sorry. He walked out into the cold afternoon, leaving Lena alone in the booth with terrible coffee and an envelope she hadn't opened. January 1st, 9:30, 4 a.m. Lena stood outside the federal building in Newark, staring at her phone. She'd spent New Year's Eve at her mother's bedside, watching the ball drop on TV while May slept, the morphine keeping the pain at bay. At midnight, while fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance, Lena had opened the envelope Kane left. Inside, a phone number and a handwritten note. I don't deserve your help. They do.
Vika.
Below it, a list of names. Jenny Martinez, office manager in Philadelphia, 3 kids, husband on disability. David Park, junior developer in Wilmington, expecting twins in March. Sarah Okonkwo, compliance clerk in Baltimore, Patricia's niece, working her way through night school. People Lena had never met, but whose files she'd protected with her invisible labor. She'd called Kane at 2 a.m. I'll do it once, she'd said. One meeting. My terms. Agreed. And when this is over, compliance gets rebuilt. Properly staffed, properly funded, properly visible. Done. I mean it, Mr. Kane. No more shadow operations. No more silent fixers. If you want to operate in gray spaces, fine. But someone needs to be watching the line, and that someone needs to have real authority. There'd been a pause. Then, I'll have my lawyers draft something. You review it before signing. Now, standing in the cold January morning, Lena wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The door behind her opened. Victor Kane emerged, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. No security detail. No lawyers flanking him. Just a man in an expensive coat, carrying a leather portfolio. You came, he said. I said I would. Lena gestured to the building. Patricia Okonkwo is inside. OSHA Regional Director. She agreed to a preliminary settlement conference if we could present a comprehensive compliance plan. You called her? Last night. We've worked together before. Lena started walking toward the entrance. She's fair. Tough, but fair. If we're honest about the violations and commit to real changes, she'll work with us. Kane fell into step beside her. What does she want to hear? The truth. Lena pulled open the door. Novel concept, I know. The meeting room was small and institutional. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a conference table that had seen 1,000 negotiations. Patricia Okonkwo sat on the far side, flanked by 2 junior inspectors. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Miss Chen. Patricia's face softened slightly. It's good to see you. You too, Patricia. Lena sat, and Kane settled beside her. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'll be honest. I was surprised when you called. Patricia's gaze shifted to Kane. Mr. Kane.
I've read about you.
Your company has an interesting reputation. I'm aware, Kane said evenly. Let me be direct. Apex Solutions has violated federal workplace safety regulations at 9 facilities across 4 states. The violations are systematic, repeated, and in some cases dangerous. Patricia opened a file. We're looking at mandatory facility shutdowns and fines exceeding $800,000. That's just OSHA. Labor and EPA have their own actions pending.
We understand, Lena said.
And we're not here to contest the violations. They're real. They happened because the company prioritized growth over compliance. Kane's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict her. Patricia leaned back, studying them. So, what are you proposing? Lena pulled out her laptop, opened a document she'd built over the past 6 hours. A comprehensive compliance overhaul. New department structure with actual authority. Third-party audits quarterly. Mandatory training programs. Anonymous reporting systems. She turned the screen so Patricia could see. Full remediation at every flag facility within 90 days. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Lena pulled up another file. A budget proposal. This is what it will cost. Real money, real resources, real commitment. No more band-aids and shadow fixes. Patricia scrolled through the document, her expression unreadable. This would actually work. If you implemented it. We will, Kane said. Will you? Patricia looked at him directly. Because here's my problem, Mr. Kane. I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've seen 100 companies promise reforms after getting caught. Maybe 20 actually followed through. The rest wait for attention to fade, then go back to business as usual. I understand your skepticism, Kane said. I would feel the same. Then give me a reason to believe you. Kane glanced at Lena, who nodded slightly. Because she'll be running it, Kane said. Lena Chun, Chief Compliance Officer, reporting directly to me. Full budget authority. Veto power over any decision that creates regulatory risk. He pulled papers from his portfolio. It's in writing. Signed by the board this morning. Patricia took the papers, read them carefully. When she looked up, something had shifted in her expression. Miss Chun, is this what you want? Lena thought about her mother's house, the quiet mornings, the freedom from emergency calls. Thought about 247 people who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because their CEO had been an arrogant fool. Thought about 6 years of invisible work finally becoming visible. Yes, she said. On my terms. Which are? Everything I do is documented and public. If we violate regulations, I report it. To you, to the board, to whoever needs to know.
No secrets.
No shadow operations. If Kane doesn't like it, he can fire me again. I won't, Kane said quietly. Patricia studied them both for a long moment. Then she pulled out her own laptop. Let's talk settlement. They negotiated for 3 hours. By noon, they had a framework. Reduced fines in exchange for immediate remediation, third-party oversight, and quarterly compliance reports. Outside the building, Kane stopped on the steps. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Lena pulled her coat tighter against the wind. The real work starts Monday. I know, Kane extended his hand. Welcome back, Miss Chen. Lena looked at his hand, then took it. It's Chief Chen now, she said. And I'm not back. I'm starting something new. January 15th, 9 a.m. The compliance department occupied the entire 6th floor now. Not a forgotten corner of the 3rd floor with broken heating, but prime real estate with windows overlooking the city and enough space for a team of 12. Lena stood at the glass wall of her new office, watching her staff settle into their first day. Real desks, real equipment, real budget for the software and systems they'd need to do this job properly. Her title was etched on the door in clean letters. Chief Compliance Officer, Lena Chen. Visible, undeniable, real. The auditors are here, her assistant called. Marcus Webb's former HR person, Jenny, who jumped at the chance to join the new department. Conference room B. Lena grabbed her tablet and headed down the hall, passing walls that would soon hold compliance metrics displayed for everyone to see. No more shadows. No more secrets cleaned up quietly in the night. The third-party audit team sat around the conference table, serious people with serious credentials, hired to verify that Apex's reforms were genuine. They'd spend the next 3 months examining everything, and their findings would go directly to the regulatory agencies. Ms. Chun, the lead auditor, a woman named Dr. Reeves, stood to shake her hand. "We're ready to begin." "Excellent." Full access to all systems and records as promised, Lena pulled up her presentation. "Let me walk you through the new structure." She spent an hour detailing the changes. Automated monitoring systems that actually worked, mandatory training programs, whistleblower protections with teeth, escalation procedures that couldn't be ignored. "Impressive," Dr. Reeves said when Lena finished. "If implemented correctly, this could be a model for other companies." "It will be implemented correctly," Lena said. "That's my job." After the auditors left, Lena returned to her office to find Victor Kane waiting. He looked different somehow, still sharp, still dangerous, but the flat coldness in his eyes had shifted to something more calculating and less cruel. "The board meeting is in an hour," he said. "You're presenting." "I know. They're not happy about the cost." "I don't care if they're happy. I care if they're compliant." Lena gathered her materials. "We agreed, full transparency. That includes telling the board exactly how much their shortcuts have cost them." Kane smiled slightly. "You've changed."
No.
"You're just seeing me clearly for the first time." They walked to the elevator together. As the doors closed, Kane said, "The Philadelphia office reported something interesting yesterday." "Oh." 3 employees came forward with safety concerns. "Use the new anonymous reporting system. All legitimate issues that need addressing."
Good.
"That's exactly what's supposed to happen. It's going to slow down operations. Cost money to fix." Lena looked at him directly. "Mr. Kane, if you're having second thoughts about this arrangement..." "I'm not," he held her gaze. "I'm telling you because it's working. People are using the systems you built. They trust that someone's actually listening." The elevator opened onto the executive floor. "They should trust it," Lena said. "Because I am listening. And if anyone, including you, tries to silence them, I'll make sure Patricia Okonkwo and every other regulator knows about it." "I believe you would." "I absolutely would." They entered the boardroom, where 15 executives waited with varying degrees of skepticism and hostility. These were Kane's inner circle, the people who'd built fortunes operating in gray spaces, who saw compliance as expense rather than necessity. Lena didn't care. She pulled up her presentation, and for the next 90 minutes, she showed them exactly what their negligence had cost: $27 million in fines, $8 million in remediation, countless hours of legal fees, and a reputation that would take years to rebuild. "But this," she said, pulling up the final slide showing the new compliance structure, "is what prevention looks like. It's expensive. It's inconvenient. It requires saying no to profitable opportunities that carry too much risk. And if we don't like it," one board member challenged, "then I resign, report everything to the regulatory agencies, and you explain to shareholders why your chief compliance officer quit." After 2 weeks, Lena closed her laptop. "Your choice." The room was silent. Then Kane spoke. "The vote is a formality. This isn't optional. Ms. Chun has full authority to implement these changes. Anyone who undermines her answers to me." The meeting ended with reluctant approval. Afterward, Lena returned to her office and called her mother. "How was your first day?" May asked. "Terrifying. Exhausting." Lena looked out at the city. "Perfect. You sound happy." "I am. For the first time in years, Ma. I'm doing work that matters. And people can see it. Your father would be proud. Working in the light." Lena smiled.
Yeah.
He would. That evening, she stayed late, not because there was an emergency, but because she was building something that would outlast her. Systems that worked. Protections that held. A culture where doing the right thing wasn't invisible labor, but the expectation. Around 8 p.m., she packed up to leave. The office was empty except for security, the city lights glowing below. As she waited for the elevator, she caught her reflection in the glass, no longer hunched and careful, but standing straight. Visible. The elevator doors opened. Victor Kane stepped out, looking surprised. Working late. Just finishing up. You? Same, he paused. For what it's worth, Chen. I'm glad you came back. I didn't come back, Lena corrected. I started something new. There's a difference. There is, Kane nodded slowly. And I'm glad for that too. The elevator carried Lena down to the lobby, out into the January night. She walked to the train station, no longer invisible, no longer silent. Behind her, the Apex Solutions building rose against the dark sky, still an empire, still powerful, but no longer run like a crime family that mistook silence for weakness. Lena Chun had made sure of that. And this time, everyone was watching,